Let's roll. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to have with me today the OG, the grandfather of the sharing economy, Casey Fenton, the famous creator of Couchsurfing, who will be joining me today to talk about his journey from building Couchsurfing to becoming a real modern day philosopher to many of us, to now building his next project, Upstock. Casey, are you ready to take it from the top?
Sure, Erasmus. Thank you so much for having me today. You told me a little bit about what you want to talk about, and I was really excited. There's a lot to cover for sure, but thankful to be here.
So I want to hit it off really with this great backstory, which is you coming out of, I think it was high school, you really wanted to travel the world and you wanted to go to Iceland of all places. And the goal of the trip was to really make local connections. And you had a slightly unconventional way of doing that. You went to the website of the local university, the University of Reykjavik, and you scraped that website for email addresses using, I think, like a PHP scraper, and then emailed, I think, 1,700 people, of which a surprising
Sure.
amount replied. And that's sort of how it all got started. But maybe take us back to this first proof of concept.
Sure. Yeah. I guess it was an MVP, whether I realized it at the time or not. I just knew that I needed something like that. I was, early days of my travels, I was feeling kind of like just a small person in a big ocean. Everything seemed big and scary and kind of far away. And I was working on like one of my first companies. And I just was like, I just really want to try out this idea for Couchsurfing. I'd had the idea, but I hadn't had a chance to try it. So as I did back then, I would just buy cheap plane tickets to somewhere, anywhere that was like kind of on sale. And I had a cheap ticket to Iceland, and I was leaving. Got it on a Monday, and I was leaving on like a Thursday or Friday or something. And like you said, I was able to extract 1,500 names and email addresses and construct an email merge in PHP and a script to go through mail merge and send them a personalized message with their name in it, just trying to make it personal and personally about them and personally about me. I didn't have a lot to go off of other than their name, unfortunately. But it was, just trying to see if there is like, hello, is there anybody out there who wants to meet other people and have an experience of some sort? And just the overwhelming response kind of blew my mind, and I was so super excited to go and hung out with quite a few people there. Just in a few days and a long weekend, and it really, the MVP proved itself. Said, okay, I have to travel like this every time. I can't. How could I not travel like this? I guess is the idea.
You ended up staying with an R&B singer who took you then to a party with lots of models. It sounds like the perfect couch surfing experience, right?
It kind of. I mean, you'd think so stereotypically, but it was way in over my head. It was really, me being a super shy person. That was about the probably most challenging thing. One of the more challenging things I could do, because I don't know how to talk to people. I'm just following them around very awkwardly, like I don't fit in here, and trying to be cool or just trying to say something that doesn't seem super uncool. And they were really really nice. They were really sweet. And after some time, we were just laughing like friends and going on adventures. So it was it just really it was heartwarming, I guess.
Couchsurfing has often been described as the back pass to the world, as well as the world's largest trust experiment. Going and traveling and seeing people outside of your normal social circle, not just outside of your country. I think that's one of the key fascinations that I always had with Couchsurfing. Let's talk about something quite interesting. You were actually a not for profit
Right.
501c company initially. And there was this great story that the IRS wouldn't actually let you qualify as a not-for-profit company, and then sort of
Right.
forced you out of that status.
Yeah, I think the part of it could have been timing. I mean, there's just a lot going on then. But by timing, I mean that the IRS, a couple of years before that, I think they had, egg on their face, so to speak, because I think it was a Stanford research study. They made fun of the 501c3 departments and saying they'll approve anything. In fact, here's a list of 5 or 10 completely ridiculous sounding charities that you look at and you're like, who would approve that? So I think they were feeling a little maybe embarrassed. It's just my idea of how of why wouldn't they approve Couchsurfing? We're clearly we thought clearly charitable is clearly about cultural exchange, education, and after we fought with them, spent $500,000 in like 5 years fighting with them, and finally they gave us back the response, and they said all 10 ways in which you've articulated with high-end lawyers that you're charitable. We're like this. It's like an online community center. It's like this. It's like this kind of cultural exchange. It's like we're trying to connect ourselves to all of this existing case precedent. And in all of the ways, I denied every single one. I'm just like, how can you deny every single one. It just seems I could imagine some, maybe not, but not all of these. And I got them on the phone finally, and I was surprised because it was not only our examiner, it was her boss and her boss's boss, and they were all three read over the denial, and they're like, "Yep, that's it. Don't apply this. Don't go to the ombudsman anymore. Just get out of here." And I said, "Can you just level with me? Like, why is this? Like, we've just, it's like we're pushing this boulder uphill, and now you're just saying get out of here. But I just need to know why." And they said, "It just seems like couch surfing is a way to save money. In fact, you should probably be asking people to pay taxes on the value they're receiving from staying at people's houses for free, right? I mean, there's clearly some value there. Have you thought about estimating the taxes and sending them at 1099?" I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So I just like, please don't do that. And I just had to really kind of realize that it was just not going to happen. There, I couldn't think of any other things to do. It was right around that time that B Corporation started to come out, the one that you don't have to seek to maximize shareholder value. That's like Delaware C corps and other regular corporations. That's kind of the idea is if you're supposed to maximize shareholder value. Anyway, B Corps, you can maximize stakeholder value. You can name all your stakeholders. So I said, okay, that seems like a reasonable a way to go. So then we had a whole next chapter of like, how do we even do that? And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life, that's for sure.
And then Benchmark actually ended up buying you out because there was like this time limit of, I think, 6 months, whereby you need to have the
Yeah,
assets converted
not
to a.
exact. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say buyout. That sounds like a whole acquisition, right?
I think you talked about that formally, if you seize the status from the 501c, then you have like a
Mhm.
time frame whereby the assets have to be transferred to a
Yes, that is.
that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, that part. That's correct. So basically, when you have the assets in a charity, like for instance, the New Hampshire Charitable Trust, as it's known, uh, everybody who lives in New Hampshire owns all the 501c3s. Technically, that's kind of how it works for the nonprofit. So if you want to remove assets from that charitable trust system, you have to figure out what the fair market value is, and you have to get that money. So where do you get the money? You can't get it from yourself, right? You have to get it from somewhere else. So it's like we're like caught. And it's like, oh my god, this is like this insane situation. And this catch, it was like the most crazy legal expensive catch 22 you can imagine. So we're like, all right, how do we figure this out? And if we don't figure it out in a certain amount of time, maybe the company's completely dead. That's when we started saying, okay, who could help us buy this out? And one of my co-founders actually lived in Palo Alto near Sand Hill Road, and he said, well, I'll just go talk to some of these people here. Could they help us? But then and do this quickly, but then also keep the community intact with all of these different protections. Are they open to that? So we finally found an investor who would do that. Most were like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. It's too crazy, this crazy community. And then we finally found one, and that was we were thankful for that. But it took a long time to figure it all out. Everything had to work for the company to survive, and if not, it was the company's in huge jeopardy.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And it wasn't just any investor, it was one of the best venture firms in the valley. So you got them with this legal mess. But let's go one
yeah,
step back on the minimum viable product before you even got into this situation. And what I liked about this was this reflection of you coding it and really writing functional minimal code in the beginning, really like in the spirit of many indie hackers today while you were staying on the couch of a friend in Alaska. So talk a little bit about this heavy lifting before everything got started.
yeah, I think with any problem, I'm a computer programmer, so the first thing I go to is, "Oh, maybe some code could solve that. There must be something. Let me think." And you just sit there thinking about some code that could solve this problem. And so the problem is I want to go and stay with other people, and then come stay with me, and we could all do this together. And so of course I thought of social networks, and so I started programming right around the time like Friendster was coming out. So it was I think that was kind of on people's minds, and oops, sorry, cat is climbing the wall here. So yeah, so I just started. So I just trying to use the nights and weekends while I was working on a U.S. Senate campaign here in Alaska to work on this. And other people go out to the bar, and I just stay home and say I got to see about a thing. And I was already a computer programmer for years, but this really sharpened my skills because when you get that feedback loop, you get people saying, "Oh my God, this is really good. I really appreciate this experience I had with another person." and it makes you just like, okay, I'm going to stay up for 3 days straight in a basement and just keep programming. I'm not going to stop ever. And so that feedback loop is so important, especially when you're starting companies. I think people always say, okay, I got to do this, I got to make everything perfect, I got to raise some money, I've got to do whatever. Like, no, you got to create a feedback loop where people start telling you what you're doing is good and helpful to them, and then that will be your fuel more than anything to make this thing happen. So it goes along with all the lean startup MVP stuff anyway.
You were really feeding on this positive feedback and having real people travel to real places.
Mhm.
And it's something that brings me to the next topic that I thought a lot about when thinking about couch surfing. This delta you really have between value creation and value capture. In the beginning, I think there was no business model at all because it was planned to be a not-for-profit organization, which would have survived by donations, right?
Yeah. So just real quick on that, what we when you're before you get the 501c3 designation, you're allowed to operate as a 501c3 as they're examining you. So what we did is we said, okay, we I guess we survived by donations or something. So I put in the verification, and that was we were like, is this a service? Is this a donation? We don't know. We were just trying to figure that out, and the IRS is going back and forth on like, this is not really a donation. This is kind of a service. And then we're like, well, maybe it's a donation, because they were saying, well, you can't survive unless it's a donation, right? So, well, you can have some amount of income on a service. So that was all that was challenging for us. So that was gray area. Also, we tried to apply for grants, but there are no grants out there for anything cultural exchange, anything. There was the one $30,000 grant total, but we were already making what 100 a million, 2 million a year. So it was just a drop in the bucket. Didn't really matter. It wasn't worth going after. So ultimately we were very much helped in surviving off the donation of people's time, ambassadors, people all over the world, couch surfing. We're all doing this together. That part, absolutely. Were we able to get actual donations? That's a good question. Technically, I guess not, and that's why one of the reasons why that model wouldn't work so well. But we're definitely getting people's time and energy donated, which was the most important.
What's interesting is that it really reminds me of the open source software community,
Yeah,
which where
absolutely.
you have a lot of foundations, right, that purely survive on donations. And then you have the commercial open source software where you have this
Mhm.
commercial layer built. And I think as you were transitioning from the 501c to a for-profit B corporation, you had to layer on top a commercial model, which you iterated on
Yeah.
quite a bit, I think. And in the end, you ended up with this model where you would actually charge the demand side, right? Airbnb later hijacked the narrative of the community and the entire sharing economy. And they had this great model of telling the hosts that they're charging them only 3% while charging the guests 12%, totaling to a take rate between 15 and 20%. How are you thinking about the different models and the optimal way to keep the community alive and being about sharing and providing the same experience that you started out with, but still having some business model around it?
Yeah. Oh my God, that was always one of the most challenging questions. Is because if imagine it like as a spectrum or something. It's like if you have a spectrum of like we charge nothing, and we just try to do it on, I don't know, a few donations to make the servers stay up or something, and everybody's just completely on volunteer time. Then you have a certain level of quality and a certain kind of certain quality of how you're able to help your members have the experience and have the impact in the world, which I would argue is probably lower. And then there's somewhere at the higher end where you have unlimited resources and you could pay the best programmers and the best safety team people, and you provide a very high level experience because you can kind of pay to guarantee certain results. And then there's somewhere in the middle, and so we're constantly saying, well, down we were operating down here at this one side of not very good quality, of people complaining all the time and servers going down and everything's slow. We're like, oh, that's not good. So we need to have enough income to have a good enough quality where we're not endangering people. And then people don't have to wait 10 seconds, 30 seconds even for the page to load each page. That was for quite a while. That was happening. That was challenging. And then, and then there's up here, and then people I think are afraid that, well, if you go too far over here, you're going to start generating profits, and not just going to be paying, for the thing to work, but you're going to start generating profits or something, and then it's going to be kind of twisted into some kind of capitalist dystopian thing, right? Couchsurfing never made enough money to ever even consider that. I know that was a lot of people's fear, but it was really, we've always just been trying to make it work and survive. So people have tried different things, and kind of different people that are in charge at different times have ratcheted up and tried different more extreme measures to make sure that it would be there for people. I like to say that it's there for our grandchildren. I always want it to be there, the backstage pass. So different people have different ideas about what is good there, and we can argue that out. But certainly during the pandemic, they decided that they needed to make sure that the company would survive, so they put in a paywall. Is that good or bad? I don't know. If the company's still here, I'm thankful for that. But I couldn't. I'm not looking at the numbers in a day-to-day perspective, so it's hard for me to say.
As a last point to couch surfing, as you were a marketplace in the end, you have this typical, chicken and egg question. It might be a bit different in the case of couch surfing because this marketplace is really about truly connecting, and every individual experience can provide so much more value to either the host or the guest. If you think about the dynamic, who are really like the champions, the people who really wanted to host people, or was it people who were once a
Mhm.
guest and then becoming a host because they wanted to give back? What were, the strongest voices?
I see a couple different questions there, but it's kind of like, who are the heroes? I think I heard that one. I mean, everybody really coming together. It's like it's called synergistic satisfaction. Tristan Harris taught me that word recently. And I think it's really that. It's like everybody brings 1 + 1 + 1 = 10, right? It's this, we have this configuration. We all get more. We all get our lives upgraded. So I think everybody taking that risk and believing, and then seeing that hey, we have the safety systems or verification or vouching or whatever that make it safe, and you're like, okay, that makes it safe. um, but taking that leap, I think, so everybody's a hero for taking the leap. I would also say that people, like you said, people look toward the hosts and they open up their homes, and I think that's amazing, and that's really super important, and that's it's required, right? You got to have enough hosts. But also, I want to thank the surfers themselves. It's difficult bringing your culture to somewhere else, going and being in maybe in an uncomfortable setting. It's not always comfortable, and be positive and share who you are and share your background. That takes a lot. So I would also have to thank the travelers a lot too, and then everybody who contributes to the local communities. Of course, creating meetings and just making a safe place for people to explore. It's all everybody.
Yeah, for you personally, this experience has really shaped you. You're now a much richer person. I would say a omnivore, like someone between introvert and extrovert. And last but
Yeah,
not
that's what
least,
I've heard.
you've become a modern day philosopher, and you have this great slide deck on ego hacking. And ego, I think, is such a big topic, especially in technology. Many people raising these vanity rounds, people getting so much external validation from having investors believe in them. But you early on had this quality of taking your motivation, I think, and gratitude from the guests and from the users.
Throughout this journey, there's been always these challenges at different times, and some of them have been maybe obvious what's going on, but a lot of them have been kind of confusing. And so I've been trying to think, well, why is it happening? Why is this person acting like this to that person? Why is this person acting like this to me? What does it mean? It's easy to say, it's them, it's not me, it's them, or something, or there's something wrong with them, and reject them. But over time, I started to think, I think it's more of a dynamic. There's a dynamic between people that's causing these challenges often. The more I started to study this over time, I could go into all the different ways in which it kind of came to this, but take a shortcut here. I started to think a lot about identity. And I started to think about feedback ratios and positive psychology. There's this thing called feedback ratios, and how much positive I share with you, and then how much negative, and then how there's a nice healthy ratio there, kind of biologically, human to human. And if you get outside of that range, things get weird. You start having this downward spirals of negativity, of tit for tat, kind of, it's almost like game dynamics. And you go too high, things become meaningless, and you don't believe anybody anymore. So maybe there's this healthy ratio. I also started thinking about, we become who we spend time with. You become the 5 people you spend time with. And more recent research says you become everybody you spend time with, and who they spend time with, and they spend time with, kind of the average of all of these people and how much time and you spend with them. Started to think, wow, it's like if people are having these feedback ratios together. And then there's this other thing kind of called ego ledger, where people are keeping track of the positive and negative that they're experiencing with any person or something in the environment or group of people. If they get too much negative, they don't feel good about it. If they get more positive, they have this thriving range. And then you get too much, that's not good either. So I started to think about, again, people's interactions and feedback ratios. And at one point, I started to think, I think I have some insights here that might even garner maybe talking about it. Where I thought, if I talk about this more and talk to more people about this, I'll probably learn a lot about it. So I started speaking at tech conferences and other conferences around the world 3 years ago about ego hacking, and especially from the perspective of a like a founder or somebody working on trying to make change the world, right? The change makers of the world. You got to you don't it's not enough to just have the right plan. You need to be the right person. You need to be somebody who can understand how you're interacting with other people and how these people are either synergizing or really just falling apart and kind of being destructive socially to each other. So I tried to synergize all the different learnings and then have a big narrative through it, and then that worked well enough. Or a lot of people wanted to hear about that. Started running little mini kind of conferences, and then now my wife and I, she's here right here with me, Simone. We started writing a book a couple of years ago, and we're just about finished with it. It's like 300 pages. I'm really proud of her for sticking to it, because it's been a hard one. I can't imagine how this has been such a hard book to write. So many different challenges to it. But we're almost done. So
Yeah,
we're really
but
excited.
I heard you pre-announced that book for a while, and I've been searching
Mhm.
just before
Yeah.
whether it's out yet, but it's not out yet. And what
Yeah.
I like about the ego hacking concept, I in the beginning I thought it was about having no ego, but that's
Right.
absolutely not what it is about. It is about this understanding that people gravitate towards the positive feedback and retract from the negative
Mhm.
feedback, but that
Yeah.
you embrace suffering, and that you say the meaning is between the ups and the downs. And I've built a couple of products for the internet. I've been in the shitstorms of the internet. And I
Mhm.
think it's something that you have to learn to not let these things get too close to you. How much do you think is also related to actually running a huge global community?
So for me, being in kind of like you said, the shitstorm of couch surfing, I mean, there's so many challenges all the time. It's this person doesn't like this person is giving this person a bad reference, and now that person wants us to take it down, but we can't because we can't. And then now that person's mad at us because now they're against couch surfing or something. You could just watch the feedback ratio stuff play out perfectly on couch surfing references. Somebody leaves somebody a negative reference, and then that person wants to leave. It's a tit for tat. No, I'm going to leave you a negative reference, and everybody says it's the other person completely. They are not wrong at all. And so eventually we solved that with, everybody has to leave their reference and they can't see the other reference, and then, they get displayed. But before that, it was just so easy to see these tit for tat downward spirals, and then to feel some of that energy coming our way toward Couchsurfing organization itself. And so it was really the perfect pressure cooker to learn and kind of be forced to learn about this stuff, because I'm trying to figure out what is going on. But the idea of ego hacking is kind of like that we become what other people say we are, or to put it another way, we become what we think other people want us to be for social cohesion. It's like we have to. There's that famous research done where there's a professor on stage, and all the people in the class, all the students are told by somebody else, when the professor's on one side of the stage, pay attention, look at them, engage. When the professor's not on that side of the stage, just kind of look away, pretend like you're just not engaged, right? By the end of the class, the professor's on that one side of engaged stage, can't move. It's like right in just like on the edge of the stage, almost falling off. There's like just kind of a literal example of we're becoming the feedback loops, and where we get positive energy, where we get positive feedback, and going away from the negative with life, right? And so it's a lot of that. And so and we're being programmed every day by these feedback loops, right? So how can we be aware of our programming, just figure out who we want to be, right? Instead of the programming, we figure out who do I want to be programmed as, and then how do you get there? How do you get your friends to help program you if they're so powerful at programming us? They have more power than we do even at programming ourselves often. How do we get their help to get there? So it's all about helping. Ego hacking is about, instead of throwing away your ego, or it's about hacking your ego. So understand your ego, have some compassion for it, and then get your friends help to become who you'd like to be instead, if there's any changes you'd like to make.
No, I absolutely love that, and I gained quite a bit out of your slide deck there, and obviously looking forward to the book when it
Thank
hits the
you.
shelves. Now let's move on to the company you're currently working on, which is Upstock. And
Yeah.
if you think of couch surfing as sort of the sharing of homes, then I think Upstock can be described as the
Hmm.
sharing of
Companies ownership.
company ownership. Yeah, exactly. If I think back to my days in corporate law and stock option plans,
Hmm.
I know that you have these inch thick legal documentations, and it costs the startup a fortune to even come up with the first draft, and then even for the legal people in these startups to understand what it's all about. And then once it's with the employees, then everybody's confused and nobody knows how much of the company they actually own.
This journey, the stock options are bad and RSUs are good, or this kind of like, we want to create alignment in the companies we're building, and the current system's broken, started actually within Couchsurfing. Actually, after we did our Series A, and we are doing a Series B as well, I started to notice this problem. I started to notice it before in maybe some of my prior companies and things, companies I've been involved with advising, but it was, we got our Series A, we moved everyone to Silicon Valley, and one of our lawyers was, I don't know, one of the better lawyers around, I thought. He's a great guy, and he worked for Oric, and he'd done some of Facebook's equity systems, I guess, and he was Instagram deal maker of the year for that $1 billion Instagram deal. And he'd given us the stock option agreements, he gave them to our workers, and like, okay, best of Silicon Valley, do even better outcomes, better work. People are going to be more committed. Actually, the opposite happened, because after we gave them the stock option agreements, they came back to me, a few days later, a week later, and they said, Casey, is this like a scam? It's kind of what I got from them. And I was like, whoa, wait, no, how could this be a scam? This the opposite of what we want to be happening. We want people to be feeling really respected and cared for, and we're in it together. And they said, yeah, it seems like we have to buy the equity. Why would we need to do that? Seems like we should just receive this equity. In fact, shouldn't I be able to see this equity? Maybe I just want to see what is it. It's all this complete, mumbo jumbo legal stuff in this, thick legal documents. Why can't I just kind of see it? And I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to make a spreadsheet or something and show them what it is? And I went back to the lawyer eventually. He's like, no, you can't. But even before that, they say, well, it seems like a scam because I have to buy it for tens of thousands of dollars. And then if I don't buy it, it disappears. But if I do buy it and the company doesn't work out, then I've lost all that money. It's like there's all these ways. It's just trap doors, and I'm never going to receive this equity. And it seems like now I know it's just a job, that you're not actually offering me anything of value here. I went back to our lawyer, kind of frustrated and embarrassed, and he laughed. And maybe, I don't know if he'd made money on Facebook and Instagram already or whatever. Just maybe he's just a good guy. He leveled with me, and he basically, a guy got this idea that stock options are complex. Lawyers love complexity, more billable hours, and he said that they're upmarket. There are better systems, but they still cost a lot, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're called restricted stock units. Companies like Facebook, Google, everybody's moved over, but it's just kind of trickling down market. People can slowly start to afford it. There's even, and I talked about this, can I make a dashboard, a Google Doc or something to show them what they have? He's like, no, that would be, what if you, wrote the wrong thing? I could sue you. So he's just kind of dissuaded me from that. But a few years later, I found a lawyer who gave me these restricted stock unit documents for $30,000 for the boilerplate. And I used those, and we modified them a little bit with our lawyers, and we attached that to a Google spreadsheet where people could see that here's the value of the company, here's the value of the equity pool, here's my slice of the equity, and here's how it's changing over time. And that really made people kind of, the seeing is the believing. It's like a video game. You start seeing what it is going up and to the right. You can believe in something you see that you can understand the formula for, but it's hard to believe in a complex set of legal docs where you feel like I can't really understand what's going on, and I feel like a trap door, and I feel like if I really tried hard, I'm probably not going to get it, and I'd feel like a fool later. So completely different worlds. We were drilling a runway by using the system because people could all believe, and they could take less cash and get more equity. Started using that just with our companies, with my startup and other startups that used it, and then I ran into Sally Bannister at Founders Fund, and she put in a couple $100,000 to really make it a company. We incorporated in Delaware. I came on full time on that project. That was 2017, middle 2017 or so. Since then, we've just been testing with hundreds of companies, trying to create this super cooperative situation where everybody can get a fair share and believe in it, right?
Talking about runway and extending your runway by actually motivating your early employees, your early believers, what's the optimal sort of entry point for Upstock? Is it a company at pre-seed? Is it at seed? Is it at Series A?
It's surprisingly, there's probably a kind of ideal customer moment for us where we lower our customer acquisition cost, our CAC, and increase our lifetime value. And there's some realm that would be true. We haven't found exactly where that is. We have some pretty good ideas after testing this with over 100 companies, and now we have over 50 paying customers or so. It's really all over the place because it is such a massive upgrade, and it just becomes so obvious that the old system is old, that it works so well for people that are down market, they're quote unquote down market, that there's just a few workers, right? Workers can see their ownership, and it costs 10 times less than stock options. That's a win. For people that are, let's say 50, 100 workers, people can see their ownership, and it costs less, but they don't care so much about the fact that it costs less. They mostly care about the fact that it really motivates people, and they don't have to do complex 409A evaluations, because with RSUs, you don't need that. Usually, it's the people, the general counsels within those companies, or even lawyers that are now adopting Upstock and helping their clients administer it. Because when you can see what you have and simplify, and then have all of these, because we not only can we deploy equity in like a 4 years, 1 year cliff kind of way, we can do a backloaded equity, kind of like Amazon does it, so that and then you can see it and your vesting schedule. But we also do dynamic equity, where you can set aside a pool. People can earn pool points, as they're known, by time, by quarterly bonuses, or any kind of bonus you want. Tasks, like let's say you have a whole, you have 100 ambassadors and you want to incentivize them all and give them all a little bit of ownership, or even customers. You want to give a lot of people a little bit of ownership for doing certain tasks. You can do that with our system. So you can even convert stock options into RSUs just in our flow.
I guess the reason why I'm asking is that what happens if you have a company that already has a pretty complex system in place? Do they have to natively switch over to your documentation, or is it quite flexible?
Anything that they've already had, they could just keep running it the way they run it. Or they could say, okay, we're going to stop vesting on this, right? And, because they could just say, we're going to stop vesting here anytime, and we're going to start vesting over here. So you could do that. You could also say, well, we're going to offer people the opportunity to convert their stock options within the flow of the onboarding in our system. It's, I hereby surrender my X number of stock options and receive Y RSUs. So you can do that as well. So there's, various ways you can do it, whatever is appropriate for the company and the culture.
And if you think about other software solutions in the market, and I think you talked about this in the past, that, for example, Carta, which is often used for legal documentations, how do you sort of link into, let's say, Carta?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. So Carta is more about the cap table, the investors, maybe keeping track of stock options, but not really keeping track of RSUs. You could have one line, I believe, that you could say, okay, Upstock RSU table, or you could refer to some, a bunch of RSUs or something like that. But so Carta and those, there's a whole bunch of software systems that are really about that. They're about keeping track of the gold standard of like your cap table or something like that. That's a bit different from what we do. What we do overlaps with that a little bit, but what we do is we motivate workers, and that's all we care about: getting people to have some ownership, increasing the chances of survival of the company. I don't think the cap table increases the chances of survival of the company so much. I mean, it's kind of a commodity. It's important, super important. But what we want to do is we want people to really believe in their equity and get their fair share and try their best, do the best work of their life. That's why we exist. Create alignment between the company and the workers, and any kind of worker. It could be an employee, a contractor, an advisor, anybody, right? An affiliate, an ambassador. Because once you have that synergy, that's what really makes or breaks things, right? When you have people answering the phone, writing some computer code, and they're just doing it with that much more care, for that much longer, trying to solve the problems a little bit that much harder. That's exponential. That adds up exponentially over the course of a year, night and day. For us, it's what we're also doing, what is something that people don't think about so much, called plan communication. We're communicating that the plan, the legal plan, is a good one, and here's how it works. And so people can intuitively understand it. And when you can show them it in a dashboard, and it's like you can show them some numbers and how it all works together, you're showing instead of telling. I mean, we show first and also tell about it. But most plan communication companies out there, they mostly just tell. Let's have a video about alternative minimum tax and stock options. It's not show so much. So we that's where we really excel, and that's the difference.
No, I think it makes absolute sense. If you're a founder, you're often thinking about, all your assets being locked into this one company, right?
Right.
Founders and also early employees are notoriously under diversified, in the sense that all their net worth, or a large portion, is locked up in this company. And then if you don't have any transparency where that value is actually at, even dreaming will become hard, right?
So true.
So you have this way of actually not only doing the long-term plans, because we are all humans, we need long-term goals, but also short-term motivation factors. You can, by way of linking it to certain goals, having like this equity kicker for a certain milestone. I think it's a pretty neat way that is currently completely underexplored, I guess. What's your experience?
Yeah. So far, what I've seen is companies are diverse. They like to do things in different ways. Some people want to have a dynamic pool, put everybody in the pool, everybody's earning points, and then it becomes easier to, for like, you have contractors all over the world. We have one company, 60 contractors and a few employees all over the world, and they're creating an Airbnb kind of competitor for the islands, like upscale stuff. Cost them half or 2/3 less to build it, because they shared, instead of going to the investors, they actually shared ownership with the workers. So they get 15, 20% of their company, I think, to the workers. That was a big game changer right there. We have another company that's just getting acquired. And so that really changes the lives of people somewhere in the world, in a country you wouldn't expect. It's pretty exciting. Anything from like small mom and pop shops up to now we're onboarding companies, maybe 150, 200 workers. And we're even talking to public companies that want this. They're like, oh, you could handle all of our ESOPs. They're like, well, we could handle it in this way, sure. And so we're looking at converting our docs a bit to handle that. I don't know if we want to go in that direction. It might be, not our wheelhouse. But it's interesting that there's interest there.
But I really love that the OG of the sharing economy is bringing the sharing to the cap table. As we're running against the clock, I want to give you the opportunity to shout out where people can find out more about you, about the projects you're working on.
So you can find me at caseyfenton.com, a little bit of info there. Feel free to reach out there. You can also, if you want to find out more about ego hacking, feel free to message me at caseyfenton.com. We'll have an egohackers.com website up soon enough with the book. But if you want to talk about it, get advanced copies or whatever, like, you want to help test out the book maybe before we go to print, you could message me there. We might need a couple people to help out with that. But then also Upstock, of course, go to upstock.io, upstock.io, and reach out there. Happy to talk with people. That's what I do all day long, mostly, is talk with people about equity and just hear their challenges. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really provide legal advice, but we have a lot of lawyers on our team, and happy to help in any way we can.
Wonderful. And I hope you're doing the audible version of ego hacking with your own voice. It'll take you 10 days, but I hope you're taking the time to do it, and I'll definitely give it a listen.